Fantastic Four first steps into a greater MCU or step back to disappointments of the past? We'll talk about that and more today on Comic-Jutsu. Welcome back to Comic-Jutsu. I'm JT, and I'm glad to be joined once again today by my good buddy Super-K. Super-K, welcome back to the Comic Book Dojo. I'm excited to talk to you again today about the Fantastic Four first steps, and that's a heck of a mouthful to spit out for a title.
It sure is. It really is. They could have done better with that. Just Fantastic Four would have worked for me, you know.
I agree. Though I am excited to once again see the Fantastic Four on the big screen and to have it be given the level of care and love that it was, because it could have been, as we've seen in the past, it is a widely varying mix of results that we have received from Fantastic Four adaptations in the past, going all the way back to the classic, the Roger Corman, the infamous, the notorious Roger Corman outing, where they supposedly produced that entire film for a budget of $1 million, up to the recent missteps, shall we say, in keeping with the theme, whatever a stare theme is known as. I'm sure there's a fancy word for it out there somewhere. Those first missteps, if you will, though their hearts seemed to be in the right place, but the script was never quite right for those Fantastic Four outings, from the early 2000s. And then the Fantastic Four stick from 2015. Nobody really, was it 2015? I think it was.
Yep.
Nobody really seems to know what happened there. It's like the director had a great idea. He was trying to execute it. Supposedly there was a lot of studio interference, and we got this odd mishmash that came out the other side. But lest we run the risk of burying the lead, let's dive right in and start talking about the Fantastic Four first steps. As I am wont to do, I always like to look at the one line as listed on the IMDb. That is the Internet Movie Database, for those of you out there that are Luddites and not familiar with that term. It describes the Fantastic Four first steps as forced to balance their roles as heroes with the strength of their family bond. The Fantastic Four must defend Earth from a ravenous space god called Galactus and his enigmatic herald, the Silver Surfer. You can see my throat got tight there at the end where I was reading the Silver Surfer, because we'll talk about the Silver Surfer later. Let's talk about the good first. And I will say, of course, the first thing you notice is the production design. We're greeted to that nice faux television. It's almost like a Ed Sullivan show thing, where they're introducing the Fantastic Four to the world, and apparently they're celebrating the 4th anniversary of their existence as the Fantastic Four. This is something we're seeing that carried over from Superman almost, where he talks about where we're given that prologue info of there being 30 years of metahumans already. I mean, I think we are at that point where we don't have to have these bare bone origins anymore. But
yeah. I agree, and honestly, this is one place where I enjoyed the way they handled it better than in Superman, rather than having the words on the screen. They used the whole television thing to introduce it and set it up, which for me, I thought that was really good, because anytime I'm seeing words on a screen like in Superman, it kind of takes me out of the moment. And
I could see that.
That's just something that it didn't bug me in Superman, but I was glad they did it the way they did it in Fantastic Four.
Yeah, I agree. I like the the fake TV show segment, or it could have been a fake faux news segment. Now, if we say fake news, that has a whole different connotation, but we'll call it faux news. But we did mention in our Superman review, by the way, you can still listen to that. through your favorite podcast provider, and also you can watch the video we put together for YouTube over on the Comic-Jutsu channel. We did mention that intro felt forced by the studio, where they're like, you have to put something at the beginning, so maybe it wasn't part of the script. But anyway, that's all just speculation as to how that came about. But here, this is probably my favorite part of the movie. I mean, just kicking off, this is like, wow, yeah, this is Fantastic Four. And it's presented inside that framework of their world having that bizarre retro future look to it, where it's capped off by the fact that they still record on vinyl, on records. I thought that was so bizarre, but that was a really interesting stylistic choice. And that is one of the major appeals of this, is that they did commit themselves fully to the production design of the Fantastic Four to make this look like some sort of world of a future past, so to speak. This 1960s shaped, feeling, also in tone, future, present, today, whatever it is, because I don't think we're ever given like a literal timestamp, are we, of when this is supposed to be, which is fine, because superheroes do kind of exist in that kind of liminal space in between, our reality and their own. Oh, it does say 1964. Okay, so I'm here looking at the breakdown on the internet, and it does say in 1964. So they do actually timestamp it. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that's the cool thing about it. There you go. Right from the beginning, we see Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, and we see him stretching. We see Sue Storm doing the full array of her invisible powers, by the way, like blowing right past just being invisible and having force fields and like telekinesis and all these, fully evolved force field abilities. I almost called it force abilities, and that has an entirely different connotation nowadays. We have to be very nuanced in how we discuss these these films and stories. And of course, Ben Grimm as the Thing, or as I like to call him, Tiny Thing, but we'll get into that later. He does look great. For the most part, there's just not as much of him as there should be. Ben Grimm should be much more hulking in posture, and that was an intentional reference, because how are we going to have this tiny thing go up against the real Hulk? But anyway, and also Johnny Storm as the Human Torch, and I was pretty satisfied with the effects for the most part. I feel some people seem to be bashing on, I guess, like the Human Torch effects, but I don't know. I thought they were great all the way through. We're given this introduction. Here are the Fantastic Four. They gained abilities from exposure to cosmic rays during this space mission. That's all left super vague, in the background, quickly explained, and we're introduced to the heroes, and boom, now we're off and in their world. And that was just a nice, succinct introduction, and pretty much almost a perfect introduction. But I don't want to get into the cons right away, but I was disappointed that we didn't have like a wider cold open of them. What I assumed to be was going to be like an encounter with the Red Ghost and his super apes, because there were leaked news reports of John Malkovich playing the Red Ghost. Now I'm getting into all the hypotheticals and whatnot, but I mean, this casting news was out there, and these sequences were filmed. So you're thinking, at least they'll have some sort of opening cool battle with supervillains, and we don't ever have that. They just dive right into the world building, which was an interesting, thematic choice. And I think ultimately I'm going to have to see how this film grows on me. Actually, I went to see it 2 times. Okay. I saw it the first time during my superhero double feature film with Superman 2025, and then Fantastic Four, The First Steps, which is actually the first film they played, because First Steps, why not? Then Superman second. Okay. But I said, I'm going to go see it again. I went to see it just in the theater, dedicated to just the Fantastic Four. So I got, multiple viewings of it. And I did like it more the second time through, but the issues that I had were still not really, I didn't feel like they were really addressed. But again, we'll, wait for that for later. So those are my opening thoughts. So I went from, this is a great introduction, to, okay, let's have a cool, cold open fight with some kind of cool villain. Let's have a good look at their powers, to, oh no, we're going to settle into the world of this family, because they dive right into the revelation of Sue being pregnant, which is, if we haven't said it yet, spoilers, but I mean, you kind of know the basics of this story anyway, just from the trailer itself. So, so they dive right into to the human dynamics of dealing with this family and whatnot. And right away, you have to kind of put aside all expectations of a superhero film that's going to deliver like slam bam action, thank you Black Mask action from the beginning. The fisticuffs and all that are kind of pushed very much to the side with a focus on characterization. So am I off base with this? What do you think?
You know, you're right. I mean, we did see the little bit of the fight with the monsters at the beginning with Mole Man, which, I mean, it wasn't much, but it was there. But overall, I kind of went into the movie with the thing of, I wasn't interested in superheroics as much with the Fantastic Four. I was more interested in the super adventure and super science part of it, because to me that's kind of where they've always been, except for, you know, Ben just clobbering anybody that gets in his way. But you know, for me, that characterization part is one of the things that draws me to Fantastic Four, just on a personal level. So I really enjoyed it. Could it have been, you know, quicker? Yeah, um, but I think overall, uh, it's nice once in a while to have a movie that's a little slower, to remind people that you know, everything doesn't have to be so rapid fire. You know, we've trained ourselves to be rapid fire with everything so much, and we got to have that stimulation all the time. But sometimes you just want to kind of settle into a world, or I do anyway. And that was one of the things I really loved about it.
Well, I don't disagree with you, because I did like the characterization, if I can say the word properly. The characterization was really what pulled me in the second time around, because I was able to move past my expectations of what I thought might happen in the plot, okay, and just kind of focus on what was being presented, okay. And that's really where you get into the meat and the heart of this film, a lot like with James Gunn's Superman. It comes from the characters. I mean, the casting was really phenomenal. I don't quite understand, the negative feedback for Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. I mean, yeah, he has a mustache, but whatever. I mean, it's not that it's not that big of a deal. I mean, yeah, his voice is a little odd. One of my friends had a pretty good observation about it, and he said it's because Pedro is more of a compassionate, like, everybody kind of sees him as like a family, like a big brother or something, some kind of family member. And Reed was always more detached and intellectual, and that was part of his failing. And that's definitely something I don't think we catch much of. There may be little hints of it, but anyway, that gets back to our expectations as people familiar with the intellectual property. We have to understand that with all these films, they have to be looked at and judged in multiple ways. That one, yes, we as long-term fans will judge them for how they adapted stories and characters that we are very familiar with. And then two, we have to judge them as how do these work as cinematic works on their own, because audiences coming into it, but the majority of them are not going to feel suddenly inspired and say, hey, let me go track down Fantastic Four 48, 49, and 50, so I can read about the coming of Galactus. The majority of them are not going to do that. They're going to watch these movies. They're going to hear, oh, this is from a comic book, and they're going to say, okay, that's nice, and they're going to go on with their day and watch, whatever else is next. Fast and Furious 25. I mean,
Yep.
they don't care. So how does it work for them? So the next thing that happens, rather than having like this kind of cold open battle with established villains, we're given this Bizarro World tease. Okay, I'm skipping where they all come to the dinner table, which is another great family sequence. But where I'm jumping up to the point where Mr. Fantastic is like, I've been tracking these supervillains, and there's the Mad Thinker over here, and the Puppet Master there, and the Wizard here. It's something to that effect, right? And it's like, why are you telling, like, this is like, I'm having flashbacks to Dracula 1938 that was adapted from a stage play. It's like, this is not a stage play. You have millions of Disney and MCU dollars. Why are you pointing? This is not my production of a superhero film where I have to tell you about these things. You are supposed to show us those things. You can't get away with that. So, but anyway, minor gripe. Back up to, okay, the family dynamic. The casting is fantastic. I mean, for lack of a better word. I'm still trying to figure out who all is who outside of Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby, who played Sue Richards, the Invisible Woman. I mean, I really thought they were all wonderful. They all fit their characters well. They had really good chemistry. The chemistry between Johnny and the Thing felt odd because, I don't know, maybe it wasn't as bombastic as it needed to be. I mean, they bickered with each other, but I don't know. Maybe I'm being too, comic geeky there. But it seemed like, Ebon Moss-Bachrach did a good job with the Thing, except for the fact that he's a much milder Thing than we're accustomed to. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the whole anti-clobbering time thing. That whole gimmick through the whole movie. I feel like they could have leaned into it rather. This is where you get on into that weird realm of adaptation, versus the original properties and whatnot, because clobbering time is an accepted part of the Thing's oeuvre. It's part of his gimmick, and he smashes things and punches people, and he didn't really punch or break anything until like the end of the movie. He kind of, smashes through some columns, and I guess he kind of hits Galactus one time, maybe, so it's kind of, it was the whole thing. It was the whole approach to the characterization of the Thing just felt kind of off from there. Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, thought he was just fine. He seemed to have the right amount of pep and up and go get 'em youthful attitude. Ralph Ineson as Galactus was fine. Julia Garner as the Silver Surferess / Shalabal. She was okay for the role that they gave her. Now, as to whether or not that role should have been presented like that, that's an entirely different discussion. We'll jump on that, I guess, a little bit more later. Natasha Lyonne as Rachel Rosman, baffling script direction. Okay, that I'm going to dive into the cons again, but it's like some of the decisions they made. Like, she's fine as a character, okay? She's fine as a character, but you're expecting her to be Alicia, the blind sculptress that meets the Thing, for those of you that don't know from the comic books. Of course, Kirk and I know all of these things, and we are, but we have to remember somebody listening to this has no idea what we're talking about. And I know this because I asked on Threads, I asked people to explain some things to me, and I got responses from a bunch of normies who don't know what they're talking about. I'm sorry, normies. You should just not respond in those cases, okay? You should just watch your movies and eat your popcorn. don't respond. Don't swim with the sharks when we ask questions like that. I was looking for other comic geeks to answer me, okay? And you guys you didn't do well, okay? You go read some comic books and touch some grass, okay? So she was fine characterization for what she was as this Rachel Rosman character, but there was this question of why, what is this character, and it has this whole totally other different meaning, behind it. Having Herbie in there was cool in terms of, the robot, the little cool future past retro aesthetic of Herbie the robot. That's fun, and he's a throwback to the goofy cartoon series of the 78, which there were some goofy things. If you wanted to say, I don't say something, you'd say, I don't say thing ring, do your thing. I don't have rings. You see that?
That's a deep cut, man.
Yes, exactly. That's a reference to the ludicrous thing only cartoon adaptation of the late 70s, where he was actually a teenager that had a ring that turned him into the Thing. But yeah, that's what the Thing does not do. He does say clobbering time, though. Sorry to tell you. So yeah, lots of fun cameos. I've noticed you don't notice it on the first time through. You kind of have to pick it up through, internet clues and whatnot. Lots of fun cameos where they hid various cast members or creators or whatnot throughout the film. So there is a lot of attention to kind of, at the very least, approaching the material respectfully, although some of their message and their methodology is seems confusing to me at times. So Silver Surfer appears. She says she heralds Galactus. The world is going to be destroyed. So what does the Fantastic Four do? They jet off into space to go confront Galactus. This, I thought, was actually both a bit of some of the smartest writing in terms of moving the plot forward, and then also some of the absolute worst writing for the stupid things that happen throughout this entire sequence. So it's a bit of best of times, worst of times encapsulated in this mid-sequence. So this is definitely where the movie falters, if not at the very end with the whole battle with Galactus, which is presented in a way which is, you might say, close to being comic accurate, it's the way it might be presented or whatnot, but is it necessarily translated in a way that makes it exciting in cinema? And I don't know that they entirely succeeded with the ending. It's probably the slowest part of the whole film, but this middle sequence is also pretty nuts anyway. But I don't know, before we jet off to see Galactus, do you have anything you wanted to say about what I've set up to here?
Well, just a note on this, Natasha Lyonne's character. I did read that they put her in there as a tribute to Jack Kirby because his wife's name was Roz, but they could have done that with Alicia. I mean, a character that a person creates. What a tribute that is. This whole movie to me is a tribute to Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. But when it comes to Fantastic Four, I think more of Jack because obviously I'm thinking about just the worlds he created and the way he did with Reed's machines and so forth. That just really, that's what the Fantastic Four is for me, is seeing Kirby, is seeing that. And so the one thing I will say is I did think, even though it did kind of slow down and they made some missteps on that uh, part meeting Galactus, I enjoyed the CG and the machine and all that in terms of just visual spectacle. Um, I thought that was fun, but I thought that the CGI was great throughout the movie.
Yeah, definitely. No complaints about the effects. I mean, at least from me, I thought the effects look great all the way through. I mean, mind you, I've sat through and I own bootleg copies of the $1 million Fantastic Four production, so and I was okay with those effects as well. So take my my recommendations with a grain of salt, so to speak. But if you want to see the real Doctor Doom, you still have to go all the way back to this $1 million film that was made, over 30 years ago now.
Yep.
but anyway, yeah. So the effects they're great. They're brilliant. I love the look of the ship. There's definitely an aesthetic that they are emulating throughout this. And I compared it on my second viewing. I said this is like the daylight inversion of Blade Runner, where instead of everything is blanketed in night, it's blanketed in daylight. And it's not even so much day glow, because they did kind of settle into this kind of beige and white world, kind of, but there are blue skies. So actually the film itself is not as colorful as I expected it to be going into it. Superman is a much more colorful film. The colors are much more striking and bright and brilliant, and they are muted in this. And I wonder if part of that was a stylistic and tonal decision, because the coloring and the vibrance of the film is dimmed as it goes on, as Galactus approaches, which I thought if they intentionally did that's kind of cool. He is the devourer of worlds, so he's literally sucking the color out of this film as he approaches and whatnot. But here we go. Okay, so this is smart, because in the original story in Fantastic Four 48, 49, 50, where this is adapted from, we have Uatu the Watcher appears, who's this race of benevolent space immortals that only observe humanity and various sentient races throughout the galaxy. They're never supposed to interfere. And Uatu breaks his oath to try to help the Fantastic Four deal with Galactus and the Silver Surfer. So there's no sequence where they actually go off into space to confront Galactus. Now Reed or Johnny, one of them, maybe it's Reed sends Johnny off to get the ultimate nullifier from Galactus' ship, but that's as close as they go as to coming out in space. Galactus actually comes to Earth. So to have them go out in space actually accomplishes a few things nicely in terms of storytelling. One, they arrive in time to see this destruction of a planet. So we do actually get to witness, Galactus feeding, so to speak, I guess. And that helps drive forward the notion. You can't have a Death Star without having it blow up in Alderaan, so to speak. But yeah, just the effects through this, they're definitely all just brilliant and cutting edge. And probably the sequence where after they meet Galactus and they're fleeing back through hyperspace, where they're fleeing from the Silver Surfer and she's like skipping across, solar waves, and then eventually they have to skirt across a black hole to try to lose her. That was really neat. That was a pretty fantastic. I'm going to keep going back to that. I'm running out of superlatives here, but that was a very sharp, very innovative action sequence. And the whole thing just saddens me that much more that, like, why couldn't it be Norrin Radd? There's so many little missteps that they took in the creation of this film that it's just baffling to me. So let's talk a little bit about the negatives now. I mentioned the positives of how I thought it was smart for a script to kind of compact this and change things up a little bit. It works well for the visual storytelling medium inside the cinema. But this movie does some stupid things. Okay. They're going to send a woman who's 9 months pregnant into not only space. This isn't like a moonwalk, a space, she's visiting the International Space Station or going to the moon. She's going through hyperspace. I have to make myself calm down so I'm not yelling hyperspace every time I say she's going through hyperspace. It's all but common knowledge that one does not put a woman that's even 6 months pregnant on a plane, because the risk of inducing labor is too high. So the notion that you're going to have all these scientists, I'm just going to say it. This reeks of people trying to be too clever. I'm not going to make any assumptions as to what those people's motives were, but people trying to be too clever by saying, "Oh, Sue Richards can go into hyperspace at 9 months pregnant. She's fine." This is one of those instances where they're going to circle back and they're going to be like, that was not, We were stupid then. Yeah. We were stupid then.
Yeah.
They admit that every now and then. Like, they admit they screwed up in Doctor Strange with the Ancient One. You know, I called it out from the beginning. I'm calling this out from the beginning. The whole hyperspace birth thing is one of the dumbest sequences I have ever seen in a superhero film. That covers a lot of ground. That's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Secret of the Ooze. Even this outdoes stupidity of so many stupid films, and this one sequence where she's going to give birth in hyperspace. Okay, so I did go back after this, and I revisited the first appearance, the birth of Franklin Richards. So you know where he was born? In a hospital.
Yep.
Okay. He was born in a hospital. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, one might even say it's heroic for the woman to undertake this heroic journey of motherhood. You know, just confronting it alone is heroic. Why do we have to send it out into hyperspace? That is just stupid. It's stupid. This is where let me just say this one point, and I'll let you chime in. So this is one of those instances where I think where their messaging is confusing to me. It's like, we want it to be sophisticated, we want it to seem intelligent for adults, but we don't care if it's stupid. We don't care to the point where we're not going to put something in that is just blatantly not intelligent.
And it reminds me of during the burn run of the books, because of going out, and I want to say it was the negatives on or something like that Sue had a miscarriage because of that. And so to me, it would have made sense if they said, look, we could use you on this, but no, we can't use you on this. Just say, stay home, take care of things. They could give her a role at home, listening on the base, chiming in, on what they were doing, trying to help them. But instead of that, they stick her on the ship, and so she gives birth. And I'm sorry, but the fact that ultimately the baby is delivered by Ben with rock hands holding this tiny baby, just newly born.
And how was there not a shower of blood and viscera just exploding?
Yeah, exactly.
Through this, what I thought they have her laying on. She's not in a med bay. She's in like the main.
Yep.
She's in the main cockpit, whatever this is. This thing that I thought was some kind of bizarro retro-futuristic map, because Reed is poking it earlier, and they're talking about, tracking the Silver Surfer and stuff, and that's what she's laying on. Oh, this whole scene.
Yeah. It was a misstep for sure.
This whole sequence. Yes, I need the Men in Black to shine a little flashlight. So it's just for that 5 minutes. I actually went to the bathroom the second time. I said, I know what to expect. I'm just going to go to the bathroom. We'll refill my drink, which was actually really nice, by the way. I went to AMC Theater, I believe it was, and they have kind of this, which is I'm bringing it up because they have this interesting kind of retro look to it as well. It has kind of a 60s feel to it, and they have these soda machines where you can mix your sodas, where it has a full array of like Coke and Diet Coke, but you can do Diet Coke with vanilla or with cherry, or the whole, or orange.
Yeah.
So it was actually like a really neat extension of seeing the Fantastic Four film. So I guess anytime you want to see something that has like retro 60s vibe to it, go to an AMC theater. That definitely made it fun. So that was definitely a painful misstep, and it's something that I have to dock this film for, where I don't understand. Are you trying to be intelligent for these reasons, and then you're still saying, this is stupid for kids, we don't care for other reasons? I don't get it. Also, you mentioned it, But I did want to point it out as well and agree with you that Reed we never quite got to see the real Reed Richards Jack Kirby style machines, these giant hulking monstrosities, Rube Goldbergian devices with pipes and panels and circuit boards and doors and gears that spin and, all those kind of things. Instead, he's working on the little tiny machine, like something I would put together for my cat, his prototype of the teleporter. I mean, it still should have been, gigantic in the room that he was working on, and then the ones that they set up around the world would have been even bigger, So, in terms of adapting the Fantastic Four, that was a little bit of a miss there. But once we move past that and we find out the stakes of Galactus wants Reed and Sue's child, who's Franklin, and now they're kind of ramping up. A lot of this felt really forced to lead up to whatever they're doing in Avengers Doomsday and whatnot, and Secret Wars. I'm not even going to get into that right now, but it felt like, okay, we have to explain why Franklin is so important in this. So they get him into the story and have all this stuff happen just kind of as quickly as possible. But yeah, I do think they do kind of a disservice to both Sue and just motherhood in general. Why couldn't she stay back on Earth and she could be directing all these things? And she could have had that whole Braveheart speech, while they were gone in space, where people would have found out, through her that Galactus was wanting their child and whatnot. And she could have already, had her inspirational speech to them, that sort of thing. Or she could have just had the baby in the hospital, or she could have been observing through Herbie. I mean, I thought that was the whole gimmick of having Herbie there. Why didn't he just go in her place, and she's observing through him. That way she can still interact and stuff, but she can still be at home so that when it's time to go to the hospital, she can go to the hospital and deliver this child rather than doing what they did. But anyway, so cool hyperspace sequence for Chase to end it all out. They get back to Earth. Reed has this great idea of hiding the Earth by briefly teleporting it, I think is what the plan was. They get ready, have the entire Earth's population all work together because they're going to have to actually have like rolling blackouts in order to be able to power these machines of Reed's, and in order to do all of this to hide it from Galactus. Now, while that is happening, Johnny Storm is also going through the process of deciphering the Silver Surfer's language, which was in and of itself a really cool sequence. I mean, it was okay to see Johnny do that. We briefly talked about this before. My complaint was it's just out of character for Johnny Storm. Maybe it's like, why would he ever care about anything like this? But I was okay with it. But that's when we get to see a little bit of the cutesiness. I think it feels like, they did change the Silver Surfer into a female just to have just one more female in this story. And also to have this little bit of an interplay between the Human Torch and the Silver Surfer, But honestly, they could have done the same thing with Norrin Radd. Then would have been, Silver Surfer would be like a gay icon. I mean, they could have done it so many different ways, and still stayed true to the spirit of those characters. Because I'm really bothered by the fact, okay, they go through this whole sequence. I mean, the whole battle with Galactus is fine and everything. They have to call an audible there at the end when they realize they can't teleport the Earth because Silver Surfer has started destroying these teleportation bridges that Reed has built. And instead, they're just going to try to knock Galactus through a portal and teleport him away into space, which is at best only like a temporary solution. I mean, because obviously he's going to come back. But anyway, so the Silver Surfer starts destroying all the bridges. They're having the trouble. They're ganging up on him, having this final fight scene, and it kind of drags on. I was there watching this, and I was surrounded by a few normies in the midday, okay, watching this in the theater. And they just like start checking their phone when Galactus is showing up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, so some of them, they were just poking through their phone. So I think in some ways that is kind of the failure of this film, and that the action is just not as exciting as it could have been. For as good as they did, and as much attention and care that they put into building up those characters and trying to make them and their world feel real, they didn't quite have the dynamic action to where it needed to be. you know, though I cannot complain about the way Galactus is presented. I mean,
No.
he looks like Galactus, you know, his color palette is very grayed out and toned down, but he looks like Galactus. He acts like Galactus, but then they tag the Silver Surfer in on it. That's the thing that really bothers me, is that I'm complaining about the whole Silver Surfer thing. If you losing my train of thought here, by the way, because they changed Norrin Radd, who's a male, the Silver Surfer, into a female who is called Shalabal in this, which ironically is Norrin Radd's love. This the whole reason that he allowed himself to become a herald of Galactus was so his world could be spared, and Shalabal, his love, would be spared. Though he was forever separated from her, that was what made him tragic. Okay, and of course in the original story he does turn on Galactus, and he helps the Fantastic Four, and he helps save Earth. And here they have the Shalabal Silver Surferess turn on Galactus and help save the Earth. And they do it in a way that's convincing, because Johnny, you know, he reaches her by deciphering her language, you know, so to speak. That's how they set the whole thing up. But the problem I have with that is now it's just, she does it because she's a Silver Surfer. That's what Silver Surfers do. It steals, you know, as a person familiar with the actual story, is it steals the character of Norrin Radd. It's like, you know, so he is the original who rebelled against Galactus. Well, now it doesn't matter. That's what Silver Surfers do. If you're a Silver Surfer, you just rebel against Galactus. It wasn't a choice that Norrin Radd made, you know. Now it's just this immutable fate that he must meet, you know, and it diminishes the character. And the character of this Shalabal Silver Surfer is diminished because it doesn't have anything of its own that's original to stand upon. So, you know, so there's just problems all across the board with that. Why not just do Norrin Radd? I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
I want to give a slightly different viewpoint on that, and I think that's one thing that you and I, well, we might disagree on a little bit, because it didn't bother me. And I think the reason it didn't bother me is because I still saw it as her saving her planet and her saving her daughter. Um, and so it wasn't a love interest, it was a motherhood thing. And to me, that kind of compared her to Sue in a way. And was it necessary to go that way? No. Could they have used Norrin Radd? Yeah. I think if they introduced Norrin Radd, they should do it, you know, in a Silver Surfer movie, and then he end up going with Galactus for that. And I'm not sure they won't do it, especially since we know that this is this universe is not the you know, the MCU, so to speak, as they're in a different universe, which allows them to play with this a little better. But then again, that's just me. It didn't bother me. There was a lot that did bother me, uh, and like you said, the birth thing was really the biggest. But I will say, as far as Galactus, I really like the scene where he reaches down, picks up the Earth, and sniffs it. Just picks up a handful of dirt. I thought that was great. He's like, yummy, you know. And I did enjoy that very much, just seeing that. But yeah, you're right. The fight did drag on a bit, and though it really, really, you get to see Sue's powers, which if anyone
Right.
follows the comics for a long time, you know that Sue is really probably the most powerful member of that team. Period.
Sure. Yeah.
And and so I thought that was really cool. But yeah, it could have been a bit more of a bombastic fight.
Yeah. There was just something in the way it was choreographed that it doesn't keep one's attention necessarily. So that's why I do have questions as to, I'm not sure how this movie is going to age for me. Okay. Is it going to be one that I hold up in reverence that I can just put in at any time? Or is it going to be one that, now I've seen it, I'm good, I don't need to revisit it ever again, you know, where if they had just stayed more faithful, you know, those few changes that I pointed out, I would be arguing it for to be higher rate. You know, it would keep my interest more. You know, but I agree with the way that you see it. and that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. I figured that we had different things that we liked and didn't like about the film. I'm curious as to what some of your other cons were about the film.
Um, well, I think for one thing, um, thinking about how Sue went out and spoke to the crowd. Um, you were talking about she could have done that from the base and everything, and not only that, but you're talking about her speaking to a crowd instead of, say, live TV, where it would go world over. Um, but then again, it all depends too on how you see television in that world and that time, where, yeah, you might record something, but you have to run it back and send it out to all the stations, and also it takes a while to get there. But that was one of the things I didn't care for. Um, I think that um, you know, again, I would have preferred Alicia to have been in the movie,
Same
just
here.
just because. Um, I think that um, Johnny and Ben could have been a little more at odds. Um, I tended to let that go because I thought, well, it's 4 years. Ben's at least he never truly reconciles with how he looks. He just doesn't ever. But um, at least they're to the point now where they get along. I think that maybe um, my biggest problem with it was was that, like you said, when they pushed Galactus through, he's going to show up again,
Right.
and we won't. I mean, and honestly, the post credit scene did nothing for me.
Okay, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm right there. I'm right
Did
there with you.
nothing.
I,
It was
as
forced.
a viewer, I just won't take any more IOUs from the MCU. Like I'm not bought into it at that level anymore as a stan. Like because we've been fed every variation of superhero and then some from television to to the silver screen. So I'm not giving you. You don't get any more free passes to pass go and you just go directly to jail. You do not collect
Yeah.
$200. That was one of my big complaints, and that was actually what I asked the internet to explain to me, and I got a bunch of normie responses. And I said, why are we having an Avengers Doomsday when Doctor Doom has not been introduced in a Fantastic Four film? They couldn't, just off the top of my head, they couldn't have another one of those just a fake news sequence like Doctor Doom says this and this from Latveria, tensions grow. There are so many simple ways they could have just introduced him. They could have. What I saw somebody say online that I thought was brilliant was, why not combine Fantastic Four 5 with with this storyline of Galactus? The whole first of the movie is them dealing with Doctor Doom and a little touch of time travel, and then they come back and they have to deal with Galactus. And just heard so many just excuses. But as a viewer, I'm not going to accept any more IOUs. You either sold it properly, you're telling the story properly, you're setting things up properly. In the film you are showing me that I bought a ticket to see, or you did not set it up properly, and it was not set up properly. If I had no idea who Doctor Doom was, that whole post-credit sequence where I'm assuming that's Doctor Doom, it's a kneeling guy with a metal mask, I'm assuming that's Doctor Doom, it would have confused me. I would be talking to whoever I was there with going, who is that guy? What does that mean?
Yeah.
How do you know he's
Yeah.
not a good guy? You have
Exactly.
no idea of anything.
And just to compare, I mean, and it's hard when you got two movies released together like that not to do a comparison. But you look at the post-credit scenes in Superman. They were great. Why? Because they were just those little scenes. It wasn't a big setup. I mean, whole thing with Superman and Mr. Terrific at the end with the building, that was great. That was a little character moment.
Yeah.
What we got here was just, you know, forced. Oh, well, let's see what happens next time. And it's just like the
Yeah.
post-credit scene for Thunderbolts. That was not even paid off in this movie.
Well, can I confess that I chose not to see Thunderbolts? Like, I watched the
Perfect.
trailer and I just said, I'm good.
I did watch that, and I did enjoy the idea of misfits having to work together, and they were all damaged in a certain way, and how they dealt with that. But was it one of my favorite Marvel movies? Not by a long shot.
Right.
Um, but honestly, at the end, since you didn't see it, basically you see the Fantastic Four ship flying through the air,
Oh,
and they're
okay.
watching it from the Avengers headquarters.
Okay. So that's them showing up, and this is first steps before that, right?
Yeah,
And
so
they'll
it's
tie it all together in the next one, right?
yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm not excited by RDJ as
No,
Doom. That
that's
turns me off.
some of the worst stunt casting of all time, like all time. This is like John Wayne as Roman Soldier number 2 casting bad.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I mean, it's
yeah,
horrible.
it is.
They are pandering to their audience now, which is no longer a Marvel audience of people that grew up as fans of the stories and the characters. It's now an MCU audience, which
Hmm.
knows only the MCU, and that's what they're catering to. They're considering, oh well, we told everybody it was RDJ, that was Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, so we don't need to tell them anything else. You did that at a press conference. That does not freaking count. That doesn't
No.
count. So just lazy writing. This reminds me of the Disney slump when we were kids, because Disney hit a slump, and then didn't really regain prominence until maybe the late 80s or 90s, right? I mean, it was almost like
Right.
maybe a 15-year slump, because their films had become so formulaic that when you went to see them, it looked like a Disney film and it felt like a Disney film, but just didn't excite you like the classic Disney films did anymore.
No,
And
not at
that's where we
all.
are now. These movies look like Marvel movies, they feel like Marvel movies, but they lack the excitement, and in some places they lack the true character, and they are ringing hollow. But character is definitely the strongest point of this film.
Yep.
Baffling scripting or casting missteps aside, that's still the strength of this film. And then, I guess, all the actual heroics and special effects and world design and everything is kind of secondary to that surrounds and envelops and actualizes these characters in their world. So I definitely enjoyed it. I mean, my estimation went up on the second viewing. So I went from a 6 to a 7. I would give it a solid 7. I'm curious as to see where, how it improves or degrades in my mind over time. I mean, how would you rate Fantastic Four First Steps?
I would go. I'd give it an 8, and that's just because you know I don't have the qualms about the Silver Surfer like you did. Uh, but overall, it felt like the Fantastic Four. Uh, there were a lot of things I loved about the movie. Was it perfect? Not by any stretch of the imagination. Was it enjoyable? Yeah. Was it the best big release Fantastic Four to date? I'd have to say yes. Um, you know,
Yeah,
even
that's true.
though, even though, you know, if I'm honest, I can, I can watch any of the Fantastic Four movies just because I enjoy the Fantastic Four, with the exception of the 2015 movie, which I
Yeah.
still have. But it's more of a sci-fi movie than a Fantastic Four movie.
It is,
But
and the ones from the 2000s they had a charming appeal, kind of a goofy charm to them.
yeah, but they were in no way close to the original conception.
No.
Other than the fun banter between the characters, that was it.
Yeah.
And this Reed was by far, I think, the best we've seen of Reed Richards.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the casting was pretty brilliant. I suppose all of my my qualms come down to the script writing and those decisions that they made, and I'm just left baffled by it. And audiences seem to be a bit baffled as well. The grosses have not been great. They're not crippling losses, but they're not great grosses as of our recording. The Fantastic Four's domestic gross is up to $252.95 million. So those are not great numbers for the MCU, but they're at least, better than a lot of the bottom feeders of the MCU, and it passed the last Ant-Man film. So it will, be at least successful over time, and it's successful enough that we will see more of the Fantastic Four. Now, it's a question of whether or not they'll escape the confines of the Avengers universe, and we have another actual Fantastic Four film. But I suppose we'll have to just wait and see. But
they haven't announced anything yet, have they?
No, nothing
goes.
yet. Just everything's going through the Avengers right now. That's that's the plan. So I definitely recommend it. Say go and check it out. I'm curious as to what comic fans think of it. It seems that MCU fans they just like anything that comes out. So good for them. Keep doing keep doing what you're doing. Well, thank you for joining me.
Baby, right?
That's right. You got it. And we will do us. But thank you for joining me, right. Super-K. It's been fun to talk to you as always. So I couldn't think of a better co-host to go on this discussion of the Fantastic Four First Steps with me.
Thank you for having me again. I always look forward to it.
Thank you. You are always welcome here in the Comic Book Dojo. You've been listening to Comic-Jutsu, and we are talking about the art of comics. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.